The champagne flute shattered against the hardwood floor I'd sanded by hand 3 summers ago, and suddenly every conversation in my living room stopped. "Well," Wallace said, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve, "I guess that's one way to get everyone's attention. My name is Bonnie, and I should probably mention that this was supposed to be our housewarming party, the operative word being was." "Sorry about that," I said, crouching to collect the glass shards. "Butterfingers." But my hands weren't shaken from clumsiness. They were shaken because my husband had just announced to a room full of 43 carefully selected guests that he was selling our house. Our house. The house I'd spent 5 years rebuilding from a condemned wreck into something that belonged in Architectural Digest. "Leave that, dear," Greta said, appearing beside me with a paper towel. My mother-in-law's voice carried that particular tone she reserved for addressing incompetent children and service staff. "You'll cut yourself." I looked up at her from the floor. Even crouching, I could see the satisfaction gleaming in her eyes like she'd just won a particularly vicious game of chess. "Thanks, Greta. Always looking out for me." She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. The party guests had resumed their conversations, but the energy felt different now, forced, like everyone was pretending they hadn't just witnessed something deeply uncomfortable. "So, when did you two decide to sell?" asked my friend Lucia, appearing at my elbow with a fresh glass of champagne. Her voice was carefully neutral, but I caught the warning look she shot Wallace. "Oh, it's been in the works for months," Wallace said, loosening his tie. "Haven't we discussed this, honey?" The word honey hit me like a slap. We hadn't discussed anything. 3 hours ago I'd been arranging cheese platters and adjusting the lighting to show off the crown molding I'd restored piece by piece. Now I was apparently homeless. "I must have missed that conversation," I said, standing up. "You know how I get when I'm focused on a project." "That's our Bonnie," Greta chimed in, "always so absorbed in her little hobbies." Little hobbies. I'd gutted this place down to the studs. I'd learned plumbing, electrical work, and historical restoration techniques. I'd spent my inheritance, every penny my father left me, on materials and permits. But sure, little hobbies. "The market's just too good to pass up," Wallace continued, addressing the room like he was giving a presentation. "Leo here thinks we can get almost double what we put into it." Leo, the real estate agent, nodded enthusiastically. He was the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne to mask the smell of desperation. "Properties like this don't come on the market often. The renovation work is just chef's kiss." "Bonnie did most of that herself," Lucia said pointedly. "Well, we all contributed," Wallace said with a laugh that made my skin crawl. "Teamwork, right, sweetheart?" I wanted to ask him about his contributions, like the time he complained about the noise while I was installing subflooring at 6 a.m., or when he'd invited friends over to drink beer and critique my tile work, or the countless evenings he'd spent at his mother's house while I worked alone until midnight. Instead, I smiled. Absolutely. Teamwork. "The important thing," Greta said, "is that everyone benefits." Wallace showed me the numbers, and really it's the smart financial move. Wallace showed her the numbers, not me, her. "Speaking of benefits," Wallace said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "we wanted to make sure you were taking care of Bonnie." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to me with a flourish, like he was presenting me with an award. I opened it. Inside was a check for $5,000. "Consider it a severance package," he said, "for all your hard work." The room went dead silent again. Someone's fork clinked against their plate. The grandfather clock I restored last winter ticked loudly in the corner. $5,000. For 5 years of work. For my inheritance. For my home. I looked at the check, then at Wallace, then at Greta's smug face. Then I folded the check carefully and slipped it into my pocket. How generous, I said. Thank you. Wallace blinked, clearly expecting more of a reaction. Well, good. I'm glad we're all on the same page. Oh, we definitely are, I said, raising my fresh champagne glass. To new beginnings. The guests murmured agreement and raised their glasses, but I caught Lucia's eye over the rim of mine. She knew that tone. She knew that smile. She knew I was about to burn their world down. The toast hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Everyone drank, but the champagne tasted flat now. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, and I caught fragments as I moved through my own living room like a ghost. Did you know they were selling? She seemed so surprised. 5,000 seems low for all that work. Greta materialized beside the mantelpiece I'd restored from a salvage yard, running her finger along the carved wood like she was checking for dust. You're taking this very well, dear, she said. I was worried you might make a scene. Why would I make a scene? I asked, refilling my glass from the bottle on the side table. It's your son's house, after all. Her smile sharpened. Exactly. I'm so glad you understand. Lucia appeared at my shoulder, her jaw tight. Bonnie, can I talk to you for a second in the kitchen? Of course. I followed her past the dining room table I'd refinished, past the built-in china cabinet I'd installed myself. In the kitchen, Lucia grabbed my arm. What the hell is happening here? Apparently I'm being evicted. This is insane. You can't just let them... Can't let them what? I pulled my arm free gently. It's done, Lucia. The decision's been made. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The Bonnie I know would have thrown that check in his face and told him exactly where he could shove his severance package. Maybe the Bonnie you know is tired of fighting. Bullshit. She lowered her voice. You're planning something. Before I could answer, Wallace's voice carried from the living room. Leo, why don't you tell everyone about the timeline? When can we expect to close? I excused myself and walked back toward the voices, Lucia trailing behind me. Well, Leo was saying, assuming the paperwork is straightforward, we could have this wrapped up in 30 days, maybe less. Paperwork? Asked Paris, Wallace's sister. She'd been quiet all evening, nursing the same glass of wine. What kind of paperwork? Oh, you know. Leo waved his hand dismissively. Deeds, titles, the usual boring stuff. Wallace has been handling all of that. Has he? I asked. Everyone turned to look at me. Wallace's face had gone slightly pale. Of course I have, he said quickly. I've been managing our finances for years. That's true, I said. You have been managing them. Greta stepped closer to her son. Is there a problem? No problem at all, Wallace said, but his voice had gone up half an octave. Everything's in order. Good, I said. I'd hate for there to be any complications. The word hung in the air like a threat, which I suppose it was. Complications? Leo asked. What kind of complications? Oh, probably nothing, I said, taking a sip of champagne. I'm sure Wallace has all the documentation he needs. Of course I do, Wallace snapped. Why wouldn't I? No reason? Just making conversation? Destiny, Wallace's cousin, had been standing quietly by the window. Now she stepped forward. Bonnie, she said carefully, I hope you don't mind me asking, but where will you go? After the sale? I haven't decided yet, I said. I might travel, see the world. I've never been to Europe. How exciting, Greta said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but exciting. A fresh start. Exactly. Sometimes you need to leave the past behind and start over. Wallace was watching me now with the intensity of a hawk studying a mouse. You seem awfully calm about all this. Why wouldn't I be calm? Well, you put a lot of work into this place. I did, but work is just work, right? What matters is family, loyalty, trust. I let each word land like a stone in still water. Right, Wallace said slowly. Trust. Speaking of which, I said, I should probably go get some paperwork together. You know how these real estate transactions can be, so many documents to review. What paperwork? Greta asked sharply. Oh, just some old files. Probably nothing important. I smiled at her. I'll be right back. I walked toward the hallway, feeling their eyes on my back. At the bottom of the stairs, I paused and called over my shoulder. Leo, you might want to hold off on any listings until we've had a chance to review everything together, just to be safe. Review what together? Wallace called after me. But I was already climbing the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister I'd stripped and restained by hand. In my bedroom, I went straight to the walk-in closet and knelt beside the small safe, hidden behind my winter coats. The combination was my father's birthday. Inside, beneath some jewelry and important documents, was a manila envelope labeled, "For when they forget who you are." I'd written those words 3 years ago, the day after Wallace had forgotten to include me in a major financial decision about refinancing. My father had always told me to protect myself, to never let anyone else control my fate. Smart man, my father. I pulled out the envelope and held it for a moment, listening to the muffled voices downstairs. Then I opened it and smiled, time to remind them exactly who I was. I tucked the envelope under my arm and headed back downstairs, where the party had split into smaller clusters. The energy felt different now, charged like the air before a thunderstorm. There she is, Wallace said as I rejoined the group. His smile looked painted on. Find what you were looking for? Just some old receipts, I said, patting the envelope. You know how I am about keeping records. Greta was deep in conversation with Leo near the fireplace, their voices low but animated. I caught fragments as I passed. Me should have been handled months ago. Can't proceed without proper documentation? Wallace assured me everything was in order. I made my way to the kitchen island where Paris was refilling her wine glass. She looked up when I approached. Hell of a party, she said quietly. Not exactly what I had planned. I bet. She took a long sip. Can I ask you something? Sure. Did you really not know about the sale? I met her eyes. What do you think? She nodded slowly. That's what I thought. My brother's always been good at making unilateral decisions. Has he? Oh, yeah. Remember when he bought that boat without telling his first wife? Or when he invested their savings in that cryptocurrency scheme? This was news to me. I didn't know about the boat. He sold it before you two got together. Lost about 15 grand on the deal? Paris glanced toward the living room, where Wallace was gesticulating wildly at Leo. Some people never learned. Destiny appeared beside us, carrying an empty appetizer tray. Mind if I join this conversation? It looks more interesting than whatever's happening over there. Just catching up, Paris said. Good, because I have something to tell you, Bonnie. Destiny set down the tray and lowered her voice. I work in commercial real estate, and I've heard some things about Wallace's business dealings. What kind of things? The kind that might explain why he needs to sell this house so quickly. My grip tightened on the envelope. Go on. He's been borrowing against properties he doesn't fully own, using creative financing to leverage deals that are questionable at best. How questionable? The kind that might land him in legal trouble if the wrong people start asking questions. Paris whistled softly. Jesus, Wallace, what have you gotten yourself into? More than he can handle, apparently, Destiny said. Word is he owes some serious money to some serious people. I looked across the room where Wallace was now pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from here, I could see the tension in his shoulders. How serious? I asked. Serious enough that he's been telling people he's about to come into a large sum of money soon. The pieces clicked into place. The sudden sale, the urgency, the way he presented it as a done deal rather than a discussion. "Excuse me," I said, pulling out my own phone. "I need to make a quick call." I stepped onto the back patio where the cool evening air felt like a relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside. I dialed Hamza's number. "Bonnie, how's the party?" "Interesting. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Always am." "The deed to this property, it's in my name only, right? For my father's inheritance?" There was a pause. "Yes, why?" "And the renovations I've done, the improvements, those are legally mine too?" "Absolutely. You've increased the property value significantly with your own labor and materials. Why are you asking?" "Because my husband just announced he's selling the house." "He's what?" "In front of 43 guests, handed me a severance check and everything." Hamza was quiet for a long moment. "Bonnie, he can't sell that house. He doesn't own it." "I know, but he doesn't know that I know." "What do you mean?" "He's been handling all our finances, remember? I let him think he was in control of everything, but I kept the deed separate, in my name only, just like you advised." "Smart girl, your father would be proud." "The question is, what happens when he tries to actually sell it?" "Well, when the title company runs the paperwork, they'll discover he has no legal right to sell the property. The transaction will be void." "And if he's already taken money from buyers?" "That would be fraud." I smiled in the darkness. "Good to know. Bonnie, what are you planning?" "Nothing illegal, just letting karma do its work." "Be careful. Desperate people do desperate things." "Don't worry, I'm always careful." I hung up and walked back inside where the party was winding down. Several guests had already left, and the remaining ones were gathering their coats. Leo was standing by the front door, business card in hand, talking to a couple I didn't recognize. "Excuse me," I said, approaching them. "Leo, could I have a word? Privately?" His face lit up. "Of course. Are you ready to discuss the details?" "Something like that. Could you meet me tomorrow morning, say 10 o'clock at the coffee shop on Main Street?" "Absolutely. Should I bring the preliminary paperwork?" "Definitely. And Leo, bring everything. I want to make sure we're all on the same page about the documentation." "Of course. I'll have everything ready." As he walked away, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Wallace." "What was that about?" he asked. "Just coordinating with Leo, making sure everything goes smoothly." "Good. I'm glad you're being cooperative about this." "Oh, I'm being very cooperative, you'll see." He studied my face, looking for something he couldn't quite identify. "You're acting strange tonight." "Am I? I thought I was being remarkably calm, considering." "That's what's strange." I patted his arm gently. "Don't worry, honey. Everything's going to work out exactly as it should." And for the first time all evening, I meant every word. The last guest left at 11:30. Wallace disappeared into his office immediately, claiming he had urgent business calls to make. I spent an hour cleaning up, washing champagne flutes and collecting abandoned napkins, moving through the rooms like I was memorizing them. By morning, Wallace had already left for work. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Meeting with Leo at 2 p.m. to finalize details. Thanks for being understanding. W. Understanding. Right." I was copying documents at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang at 9:15. Through the window, I could see Greta's silver Mercedes in the driveway. "Good morning, dear," she said when I opened the door. She was dressed like she was attending a board meeting. Navy suit, pearls, that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Of course not. Come in." She stepped into the foyer, her gaze sweeping over the restored hardwood floors. the refinished staircase, the period-appropriate light fixtures I'd hunted down at estate sales. "I wanted to check on you," she said. "Make sure you're adjusting well to the news." "I'm fine, Greta. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely." In the kitchen, she perched on one of the bar stools I'd reupholstered last spring, watching me pour coffee into mugs I'd collected from antique shops. "You know," she said, "I was impressed by how well you handled things last night. Very mature." "Thank you." "Some women might have gotten emotional, made a fuss." I handed her the coffee. "What would be the point?" "Exactly. You understand that this is just business, nothing personal." "Of course it's personal, Greta. This is my home." Her smile flickered. "Well, yes, but you have to understand Wallace's position. He has responsibilities, obligations." "What kind of obligations?" "Financial ones, the kind that require difficult decisions." I sat across from her, cradling my own mug. "You mean his debts?" She went very still. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. The leveraged investments, the borrowed money, the people he owes." "Who told you that?" "Does it matter? The point is, I know." Greta set down her coffee with a sharp clink. "You don't know anything about our family's business?" "Your family's business? I thought I was part of the family." "You are, of course, but not really. Not when it comes to decisions, not when it comes to money, not when it comes to anything that actually matters." Her composure was cracking now. "You're being dramatic." "Am I? Yesterday I thought I was a wife. Today I find out I'm an employee being laid off." "You're being ridiculous. Wallace loves you." "Does he?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Wallace loves what I can do for him. The house I renovated, the inheritance I spent, the free labor I provided." Greta's face flushed. "You have no idea what love is. You think because you can swing a hammer and paint some walls, you're irreplaceable." "I never said I was irreplaceable." "Good, because you're not. Wallace could find a dozen women who'd be grateful for what he's given you." "What has he given me exactly?" "A home, security, a place in society." I laughed, and the sound seemed to startle her. "A place in society? Greta, I've been to exactly 3 social events in 5 years, and 2 of them were funerals." "That's because you don't make an effort. You're always covered in sawdust or paint, working on some project. Projects that increase the value of this house by 300%. Anyone could have done that work, but I did it. Me, with my money, my time, my hands." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This conversation is pointless. The decision has been made." "Yes, it has." Something in my tone made her pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just agreeing with you." She studied my face, looking for cracks in my composure. "You're up to something." "I'm not up to anything. I'm just a woman who's been told she's no longer needed in her own home." "This isn't your home. It never was." The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "You're right. It's not my home. It's my property." "What?" I stood and walked to the kitchen table, where my documents were spread out. I picked up a folder and held it up. "The deed, Greta. It's in my name. Has been since I inherited the land from my father." Her face went white. "That's impossible." "Is it?" "Wallace handles the finances, but he doesn't handle everything. Some things I kept for myself." She snatched the folder from my hands and flipped it open. I watched her eyes scan the legal documents, watched her face change as she realized what she was looking at. "This can't be legal," she whispered. "It's completely legal. Recorded with the county, notarized, ironclad." She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, Greta looked genuinely afraid. "Wallace doesn't know, does he?" "What do you think?" She closed the folder with shaking hands. You can't do this to him, to us. I'm not doing anything to anyone. I'm just protecting what's mine. He'll be ruined. That's not my problem anymore. She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her purse and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back. You'll regret this, she said. Maybe, but not today. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. I had a text from Leo. Looking forward to our meeting. This is going to be a great deal. I typed back, see you at 10. Bring everything. Then I called Hamza. It's time, I said when he answered. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Leo was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, spread out at a corner table with manila folders and a laptop. He looked like a man who'd already spent his commission. Bonnie, perfect timing. He stood and pulled out my chair with a flourish. I've got all the paperwork ready. This is going to be the smoothest transaction I've handled all year. I'm sure it will be memorable, I said, settling into my seat. He opened the first folder with the enthusiasm of a game show host. So I've prepared the listing agreement, the disclosure forms, and I've already got 3 potential buyers lined up. The market is absolutely on fire right now. That's wonderful. Before we get started, though, I'd like to show you something. I pulled out my own folder and placed it on the table. Leo's eyes lit up. More paperwork? I love a seller who's organized. I try to be thorough. I opened the folder and slid the deed across the table. This is the property deed. Leo barely glanced at it. Great, great. Wallace mentioned he had all the documentation ready. Did he? That's interesting because this deed is in my name only. Leo's pen stopped moving. He looked up at me, then down at the document, then back at me. I'm sorry, what? The property deed. It's in my name, Bonnie McGee, not Wallace Carter, not joint ownership, just me. Leo picked up the deed and studied it more carefully. I watched his face change as he read the legal language, the recording information, the notary stamps. This can't be right, he said. It's completely right. Recorded with the county clerk's office 3 years ago when I inherited the land from my father. But Wallace said, what did Wallace say exactly? Leo was flipping through the pages now, his confidence evaporating. He said he owned the property, that you both owned it, that he had the right to sell. Well, one of those things is true. We both live there. But ownership, that's just me. I don't understand. How can you be married and not both own the house? Easy. I inherited the land before we were married. I paid for all the renovations with my inheritance money. I did all the work myself. Wallace contributed exactly nothing to the property. Leo's face had gone pale, but the listing agreement is void. You can't sell a property you don't own. But he signed fraudulently, which makes this whole thing illegal. Leo closed his laptop with a snap. I need to call Wallace. Go ahead, but first let me ask you something. Did Wallace take any money from potential buyers, deposits, down payments? Well, yes, but that's standard. How much? 50,000, but it's an escrow. No, Leo, it's fraud. Wallace took money for a property he doesn't own and has no right to sell. Leo was sweating now. This is a mistake. There has to be an explanation. There is. Wallace is in debt up to his eyeballs and thought he could sell my house to pay off his creditors. Your house. My house, my land, my renovations, my property. Leo stood abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. The brown liquid spread across the table, soaking into his carefully organized paperwork. I have to go, he said, grabbing his folders. I have to fix this. Leo, wait. I pulled a business card from my purse. This is my lawyer's number. You're going to need it. He stared at the card like it was a snake. Why? Because when those buyers find out their deposits were taken fraudulently, they're going to want their money back. And when they can't get it from Wallace, they're going to come after you. But I didn't know. Doesn't matter. You're the listing agent. You're liable. Leo sank back into his chair. This will ruin me. Maybe. But that's what happens when you don't do your due diligence. My phone buzzed. A text from Destiny. Wallace just called. 3 people asking for emergency loans. Word is spreading fast. I showed Leo the message. Looks like the news is getting out. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to call every potential buyer and tell them the sale is off. I want you to return their deposits immediately, and I want you to send a written notice to Wallace that you're withdrawing from the listing. And if I don't? Then I file a complaint with the Real Estate Commission, the State Attorney General, and anyone else who will listen. Your career will be over. Leo stared at the soggy paperwork on the table. You planned this. I protected myself. There's a difference. Wallace is going to be furious. Wallace is going to be a lot of things. Furious is probably the least of his problems. Leo gathered his wet folders and stood again. I have to make some calls. You do that, and Leo, next time someone wants to sell a property, maybe check who actually owns it first. After he left, I sat alone at the coffee shop watching through the window as he paced back and forth in the parking lot, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from inside, I could see him gesticulating wildly. My phone rang. Wallace. Hello, honey, I answered. What the hell did you do? His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I had coffee with Leo, nice man, very thorough. Bonnie, I swear to God. You swear to God what? That you'll sell my house without telling me? Oh, wait, you already tried that. We need to talk, now. I'm sure we do, but I'm busy right now, maybe later. Bonnie, I hung up and turned off my phone. Through the window, I could see Leo still pacing, still talking, still trying to figure out how to fix the unfixable. I ordered another coffee and settled in to wait. The real show was just getting started. I turned my phone back on an hour later to find 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. Most were from Wallace, but there were also messages from Greta, Paris, and even Destiny. The last text from Wallace read, Coming home now. We're settling this. I drove home slowly, taking the scenic route through town. By the time I pulled into the driveway, there were 3 cars parked on the street. Wallace's BMW, Greta's Mercedes, and Paris's Honda. The front door was unlocked. I could hear raised voices before I even stepped inside. Completely insane if you think she can get away with this, Greta was saying. Mom, calm down, Paris replied. Yelling isn't going to solve anything. Don't tell me to calm down. That woman has destroyed everything. I closed the door behind me with a deliberate click. The voices stopped. I'm home, I called out cheerfully. Wallace appeared in the hallway, his face flushed red. We need to talk, now. Hello to you too, honey. How was your day? Cut the act, Bonnie. Leo told me everything. Did he? Good. I was worried he might not understand the situation. Greta emerged from the living room like an avenging angel, Paris trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. You vindictive little, Greta started. Careful, I interrupted. You're in my house now. This is not your house. I pulled the deed from my purse and held it up. Actually, it is. Legally, officially, and completely. Wallace snatched the document from my hands and scanned it frantically. This is impossible. We've been married for 3 years. Community property laws don't apply to inherited property that was never commingled with marital assets. I finished. I kept very careful records, Wallace. Every receipt, every bank statement, every permit application, all in my name, all paid for with my inheritance. Paris stepped forward. Bonnie, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Your brother tried to sell my house to pay his debts. When that didn't work, he decided to cut me out entirely. That's not what happened, Wallace said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Then explain the $50,000 Leo collected from buyers. Where were you planning to send my share of that money? Wallace's mouth opened and closed like a fish. We were going to discuss. Were we? Like we discussed the sale in the first place? Greta stepped between us. Enough. This is ridiculous. Wallace, call your lawyer. We'll contest this. On what grounds? I asked. Fraud, forgery, I don't care. There has to be something. Go ahead, contest it. But while you're doing that, I'll be filing charges against Wallace for attempted fraud. Taking deposits on a property he doesn't own is a felony. The room went dead silent. You wouldn't, Wallace whispered. Try me. Paris cleared her throat. Maybe we should all take a step back here. There has to be a way to work this out. There is, I said. Wallace pays back the deposits, drops any claim to my property, and we discuss divorce terms like civilized adults. Divorce? Greta gasped. Over a house? Over betrayal? Over lies? Over being treated like hired help in my own home? Wallace was staring at the deed like it might spontaneously combust. I don't understand how this happened. It happened because you never paid attention to anything that didn't directly benefit you. You assumed I was too stupid or too trusting to protect myself. That's not, isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my day, my work, my plans? When was the last time you treated me like a partner instead of an employee? Paris looked between us. Wallace, is this true? About the debts? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Jesus, Paris muttered, what did you get yourself into? Business investments, Greta said quickly. Temporary cash flow issues. Gambling debts. Destiny's voice came from the doorway. We all turned to see her standing there, holding a manila folder. Sorry, the door was open. I thought you should see this. She handed the folder to Paris, who opened it and started reading. Her face went white. Wallace, what the hell is this? What is it? Greta demanded. Loan documents from some very unfriendly people. Paris looked up at her brother. You borrowed $300,000 from loan sharks? They're not loan sharks, Wallace protested. They're private investors. Private investors who charge 30% interest and break kneecaps when you don't pay, Destiny said flatly. Greta sank into the nearest chair. 300,000? The house sale would have covered it, Wallace said desperately, with enough left over to start fresh somewhere else. Start fresh? I stared at him. You were planning to take the money and leave? Not leave, relocate, for business opportunities. Without me. He didn't answer. Without me, I repeated. You were going to sell my house, pay your debts, and disappear with whatever was left. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Wallace? Explain it to me. He looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. His mother's horror, his sister's disgust, Destiny's contempt, and my cold fury. I was trying to protect you, he said finally. From what? From them, the people I owe money to. If they can't find me, they can't hurt you. How noble. And the $5,000 severance check? Was that to protect me too? He had no answer for that. Get out, I said quietly. Bonnie, get out of my house, all of you, now. Greta stood shakily. This isn't over. Yes, it is. It's completely over. As they filed toward the door, Paris stopped beside me. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm sorry. He's my brother, but what he did was wrong. Thank you. After they left, I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by the work of my hands and the wreckage of my marriage. My phone buzzed, a text from Hamza. Heard through the grapevine that things got interesting today. You okay? I typed back, never better, but I think we're going to need that lawyer after all. The legal papers arrived 3 days later. Wallace and Greta were contesting the inheritance, claiming the deed was invalid and that I'd somehow manipulated my dying father into leaving me the property. Hamza called me that morning. They're really going through with this? Apparently, Greta hired some hotshot attorney from the city. Good. Let them waste their money. This case is bulletproof. When do we go to court? 2 weeks, but Bonnie, you should know they're going to make this ugly. They'll dig into your relationship with your father, your marriage, everything. Let them dig. I got nothing to hide. But I underestimated just how ugly it would get. The hearing was held in the county courthouse, a gray stone building that had seen better decades. I arrived with Hamza to find the hallway packed with people. Some I recognized, others I didn't. Word travels fast in a small town, Hamza murmured as we pushed through the crowd. Inside the courtroom, Wallace sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. Greta was in the front row behind them, flanked by several people I didn't recognize. Who are they? I whispered to Hamza. Character witnesses, probably. People who will testify that you're unfit to inherit property. The judge was a stern-looking man in his 60s who clearly didn't appreciate the circus atmosphere. This is a probate hearing, not a social event. Anyone not directly involved in this case needs to leave, now. Half the crowd shuffled out, grumbling. Wallace's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we're here today because my clients believe a grave injustice has been committed. The defendant manipulated a dying man into changing his will, cutting out his rightful heirs. Objection, Hamza interrupted. The will wasn't changed. The property was deeded to Ms. McGee 3 years before her father's death when he was in perfect health. Sustained. Counselor, stick to facts, not speculation. The hearing dragged on for hours. Wallace's lawyer called witness after witness. Neighbors who claimed I'd isolated my father, distant relatives who insisted they deserved a share of the inheritance, even a former caregiver who suggested I'd pressured my father when he was vulnerable. Did you ever see Ms. McGee threaten her father? Hamza asked during cross-examination. Well, no, but did you ever see her coerce him in any way? Not exactly, but did her father ever express any regret about deeding her the property? He never said anything to me, but thank you, no further questions. When it was our turn, Hamza called the character witnesses of his own. Lucia testified about my devotion to my father during his illness. My father's doctor confirmed he'd been mentally sharp until the very end. The notary who'd witnessed the deed signing testified that my father had been clear and decisive about his intentions. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. I called Destiny Grant to the stand, Wallace's lawyer announced. I turned to stare as Destiny walked to the witness stand. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Ms. Grant, you're related to the defendant's husband, correct? Wallace is my cousin, yes. And you've had occasion to observe the defendant's behavior toward her family? Yes. Can you tell the court what you observed? Destiny was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked directly at me. I observed Bonnie working 16-hour days to renovate a house while her husband played golf. I observed her spending her inheritance on materials while Wallace spent their joint account on gambling. I observed her being excluded from family gatherings and financial decisions. Wallace's lawyer looked stunned. Ms. Grant, that's not... I observed Wallace planning to sell Bonnie's property without her knowledge to pay debts she didn't know he had. And I observed him planning to leave town with the proceeds while she dealt with the consequences. Your Honor, I move to strike. I'll allow it, the judge said. Continue, Ms. Grant. Bonnie didn't manipulate anyone. She protected herself from people who were manipulating her. If that makes her unfit to inherit property, then we need to rewrite the law." The courtroom erupted. Wallace's lawyer was shouting objections. Greta was on her feet, pointing at Destiny and screaming about family loyalty. The judge was banging his gavel. "Order! I'll have order in my courtroom." When the chaos died down, the judge looked directly at Wallace's lawyer. "Counselor, do you have any actual evidence that the deed was obtained fraudulently? Not speculation, not character assassination, evidence?" "Your Honor, the circumstances are highly suspicious." "That's not evidence. Mr. Wright, do you have anything to add?" Hamza stood. "Just this, Your Honor." He handed a folder to the bailiff. "These are bank records showing that Miss McGee paid for all property improvements with funds from her inheritance account. Phone records showing she consulted with multiple attorneys before accepting the deed, and medical records confirming her father was in excellent mental health when he made the decision." The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Finally, he looked up. "I've seen enough. The deed is valid. The property belongs to Ms. McGee, free and clear, case dismissed." The gavel came down with finality. As people filed out of the courtroom, Wallace approached me. "Bonnie, please, can we talk?" "We just did? For 6 hours? In front of a judge?" "I mean privately. There has to be a way to fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "There is no fixing this, Wallace. You tried to steal my house. You lied to me for years. You were planning to abandon me with your debts." "I was trying to protect you." "Stop. Just stop. We both know that's not true." Greta appeared beside him, her face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. We'll appeal." "With what money?" I asked. "Wallace is broke, and you just spent your savings on a lawyer for a case you couldn't win." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. "Go home, Greta, both of you, and don't come back to my house." As they walked away, Paris approached me. "I'm sorry about all this," she said. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." "Did I? Because it doesn't feel like winning." "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good, but it's still right." Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Apparently, the story had made the local news. "Women fights family for inheritance in dramatic court battle." "No comment," I said, pushing through the crowd. But as I reached my car, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see an older woman I didn't recognize. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "My daughter's going through something similar with her ex-husband. Seeing you stand up for yourself, it gives her hope." I nodded, not trusting my voice. In the car, Hamza patted my shoulder. "You did good, kid. Your father would be proud." "Would he? I just destroyed my marriage and probably my relationship with Wallace's entire family." "You protected what was yours. That's exactly what he taught you to do." As we drove away from the courthouse, I caught a glimpse of Wallace and Greta in my rearview mirror, standing alone on the courthouse steps. They looked lost. Good. The house felt different when I walked through the front door that evening. Quieter, emptier, but also mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. I found Wallace's belongings packed in boxes by the garage door. Clothes, books, his golf clubs, the expensive watch I'd given him for our anniversary. Everything that belonged to him ready to go. My phone rang. Lucia. "I saw the news," she said. "How are you holding up?" "I won." "That's not what I asked." I sank into the armchair I'd reupholstered 2 summers ago. "I'm tired, Lucia, really tired." "Want company? I can bring wine and terrible reality TV." "Actually, yes. That sounds perfect." She arrived an hour later with a bottle of champagne and a bag of takeout Chinese food. "Celebrating or drowning sorrows?" she asked, holding up the bottle. "Both?" We ate on the living room floor, using the coffee table I'd refinished as our dining table. It felt like college again, except we were discussing divorce lawyers instead of midterm exams. "So what's next?" Lucia asked, refilling our glasses. "Divorce proceedings start next week. Wallace wants to settle out of court." "What's he offering?" "Nothing. He has nothing to offer. Turns out those loan sharks Destiny mentioned, they've already seized his car and frozen his bank accounts." "Jesus! What about Greta?" "Apparently she mortgaged her house to pay for the lawyer. She's not speaking to Wallace anymore." Lucia whistled. "Family loyalty only goes so far, I guess." The doorbell rang. We looked at each other. "Expecting someone?" Lucia asked. "No." I opened the door to find Paris standing on my porch, holding a bottle of wine and looking nervous. "I hope it's okay that I came by. I wanted to apologize. Properly this time." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Paris looked around the living room, at the restored hardwood floors, the period-appropriate fixtures, the built-in bookcases I'd installed myself. "I never really looked at this place before," she said. "I mean, really looked? You did all this yourself?" "Every bit of it." "It's incredible. I can't believe Wallace was willing to just throw it away." Lucia poured Paris a glass of champagne. "Your brother's an idiot." "Yeah, he is." Paris sat on the couch. "But he's also desperate. Those people he owes money to, they're not going to just forget about the debt." "That's not my problem anymore," I said. "I know, and I'm not asking you to make it your problem. I wanted you to know that some of us understand what you did, why you did it." "Do you?" "My first husband tried to sell my car to pay his gambling debts, forged my signature and everything. I know what it feels like to be betrayed by someone who's supposed to protect you." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping champagne and listening to the grandfather clock tick in the corner. "Can I ask you something?" Paris said. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I considered the question. "I regret that it came to this. I regret that Wallace chose his debts over our marriage. I regret that Greta chose money over family, but protecting myself, no, I don't regret that." "Good. You shouldn't." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Leo. I wanted to apologize for my part in what happened. I should have done my due diligence. I've returned all deposits to the buyers and reported the incident to my broker. I'm probably going to lose my license, but you were right to call me out. I'm sorry." I showed the text to Lucia in Paris. "Wow," Lucia said. "An actual apology? That's rare." "He's probably just covering his ass legally," Paris said. "Maybe, but I'll take it." Another text came in, this one from Destiny. "Saw the court coverage on the news. You were amazing. Wallace is staying at a motel on Route 9, if you're wondering. Greta's not taking his calls." "Wallace is at a motel?" Paris asked, reading over my shoulder. "Apparently." "Good. Maybe sleeping on a lumpy mattress will give him time to think about his choices." We finished the bottle of champagne and ordered pizza. By 10 o'clock, Paris had called an Uber and Lucia was gathering her things. "You going to be okay alone here tonight?" Lucia asked. "I'm not alone. I'm home." After they left, I walked through the house room by room, turning off lights and checking locks. In each room, I saw the work I'd done, the crown molding I'd restored, the windows I'd replaced, the floors I'd refinished, every nail, every coat of paint, every careful detail. In the kitchen, I found the envelope Wallace had given me at the party. The $5,000 severance check was still inside, uncashed. I held it for a moment, then walked to the fireplace and tossed it into the cold ashes. I struck a match and watched the paper curl and burn. The flames caught quickly, bright and hot. I watched until there was nothing left but ash. Then I opened a bottle of wine, a good bottle, one I'd been saving for a special occasion, and poured myself a glass. I raised it toward the empty room. to new beginnings, I said aloud, to standing up for yourself, to knowing your worth. I drank, and the wine tasted like victory. Outside, it started to rain, pattering against the windows I'd installed myself. But inside, my house was warm and dry and safe. My house, my sanctuary, my home. I'd paid a price for it. My marriage, my in-laws, the comfortable illusion that someone else would always take care of me. But as I sat in my living room, surrounded by the work of my own hands, I knew it was worth every penny. Some things you can't put a price on. Self-respect is one of them. The rain kept falling, washing the world clean outside my windows, and inside I was finally completely, undeniably free.